I would never advise a student to revenge hook. No. Now, I might revenge hook. Okay. But I would never advise.
That hits on my nose.
Welcome to Shankcast episode number 6. Here with me are Kevin and Megan. Say hello, team.
Hello team.
There.
I want to kick off today by first saying thank you to everybody who's been leaving reviews of the Shankcast on iTunes. It's really helped us out tremendously, and it's given us a lot of good feedback as well to hear what people's thoughts are about the format, about kind of the conversational aspect of it. Overall, been really positive. And I was just thinking this morning, Kevin and Megan, how grateful I am to be able to sit down and just say what we really think. We don't have to worry about a board of directors. We don't have to worry about members. We don't have to worry about a director of tennis. We can sit here and for the most part, just kind of say it how we see it. And I think that's a really fantastic thing. And I think that's why people enjoy listening to it's kind of a breath of fresh air. You know, in a normal tennis environment, you got to be really careful about what you say around which people. And it's great to just just kind of say how it is.
Yeah, I think that's refreshing. I think a lot of people like that candidness because we're in this weird, interesting spot where we don't have to answer to a lot of people other than Ian.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Sometimes.
Yeah, it's like our normal office talk, but with mics in front of us.
Right.
And you guys get to join in. It's like you're right here with us.
Yeah. So through the rest of September, you have just a few weeks left. If you'd like to get a free coaching program from Essential Tennis, all you have to do is go to either iTunes or to the podcast app on your iPhone. Just leave a rating, leave a review, send a screenshot of that to support@essentialtennis.com, and let us know which of our instructional programs you'd like, and we'll hook you up for free. And just for thank you for supporting the new show and helping it get off the ground. So today we're going to talk about dealing with cheaters.
Oh, yeah.
If you've played competitive tennis, you've dealt with bad calls.
Hit them in the throat.
We'll talk about, is that an option? Is hitting them in the throat a viable response? We'll get to that. Here are the questions, and I think a lot of these are going to get rolled together, but just to give you a little roadmap of what we'll be discussing here today, we're going to lead with what I think is really critical to talk about. I'm glad I thought of this just 30 seconds ago. What percentage of wrong calls do you believe are purposeful bad calls, like actual hook? In tennis, that's what a purposeful, cheating call, we call a hook. What percentage of bad calls do you think are actually a hook? How were you most commonly cheated, and what are the biggest examples of kind of the most common ways that the three of us felt like we got cheated out of points or games or sets or matches? What is the single worst incident in which you were ever hooked? How did you most effectively deal with cheaters? How do you guide your students to deal with cheaters? And then finally, I think we'll save this for the end. Is it ever okay to revenge hook?
The revenge hook.
Real quickly, revenge hook means that you are knowingly and purposefully cheating back and taking a point from your opponent to send a message and let them know that it's not okay for them to continue to make bad calls against you. This is like the nuclear option when it comes to dealing with cheaters. Is that okay? Do we officially condone that, the three of us? We have not discussed that yet at all, ever. So I'm actually kind of curious to hear where that goes. So to kick off, Kevin Garlington, what percentage of wrong calls, bad calls, do you believe are actually hooks, are actually purposeful?
Oh, God, this is a tough one because I think it really depends on level. Like in the juniors, in the beginning, just kids are blind. So everything's out. And it's emotional.
When you say beginning, what's...
So I would say when kids just start off, it's like an emotional thing where it's like if you have a kid at home.
Red ball, an orange ball.
Yeah, a red ball, orange ball.
Just before 10...
Yeah, before 10. Every kid has this imagination that every ball that comes close to the line is out. And it's you're like, no, dude, that was a foot in. And they look at you and they wholeheartedly believe it was out. Coach, it was out. I saw it out. I saw it. And you're like, no, you didn't. So I would say a higher percentage there, but it's not purposeful, I don't think. Then you have these little bastards that actually know what's going on, and they're like a little bit more mature, and they know how
Still
to like.
talking like 10 or under, or are we talking a little?
This kind of crosses the bridge. You got 10 or under, and sometimes older. If they get a little older, they're experienced. They've matured the skill to a fine art. Where
And they know what they're doing?
They know what they're doing. So it's like a ball gets close, and they go, oh, and you're like,
Yeah, we used to have an experienced child in that we
See,
taught.
I'm not even going to mention your name, but you know who I'm talking about. You're grown up now, and I still love you, but yeah. And like all these different like things they would do, like if like a grunt would either be a grunt or an out call.
Totally.
I mean, it's amazing. Once you get, I think, older, especially for the guys kind of handle it because it gets kind of to be this thing like, don't do it, don't go there, because it can become a very dark place. With the girls, I'm gonna let Megan talk about the girls. It just gets ugly.
What about adults?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to next.
Okay.
College is just. Sorry, I love college, but
You're
it's
making it
just
sound like it's a very high percentage, Kevin, of purposeful.
College is
bad
like
calls.
it's like mad scientists of cheating. I mean, they develop like experiments of how they can get away with things. Adults, I don't see it as much in adults, and I think I come back to the basic core thing of what type of adult situation are you playing in. If you're on a team, it's very shunned to be that person, unless you're that person and you're okay with it. So like if you're in a social like USTA team and you have a bad call, more than likely tons of people are looking and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you made that call. And like you have
talking about the other team or your
other team,
own teammates?
Yeah, your teammate's not gonna say anything. They're just gonna go like, ooh, ooh, and they're like gonna turn their head and
Look
kind
the
of
other
like
way, yeah,
look
totally.
the other way, like, and people are gonna like, did you see that? No, I was
Pretend
looking
you
this
didn't
way.
see it, yeah.
I didn't see anything. And the other team's like, oh, how could you miss that? I mean, it was so far in. And so I think there's more social pressure not to be that type of person, unless you're that type of person who's just like,
You just don't care.
Yeah, I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm just going to hook you. And then I think the last part is you have, which we might talk about later, is the different situational hooks. Which
Different flavors. Yeah,
there's a lot of different flavors.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out. Why don't we go ahead and just define those real quick? So just off the top of your head, different scenarios.
I need the big point. Like you, it's a break point. And you're like, the ball lands really close to the line, and you literally like just like, out. And you turn around, and the other person's like, what? Because by the time everything gets fixed around, you got the game. There's like, okay.
Because if you don't call it out, you lost the point, you lost the game, blah, blah, blah.
Or either that, or it's like you win the game or win the set, and once they go get the ref, it's like, we're not going back to play that. We'll start on the next point after I already claimed the set. You have what other?
I didn't see the ball bounce, but I'm going to call it out anyway.
Yeah.
Definitely happens. I feel like at the adult level.
It was close.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was close. It was out, though.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other ones. Most of it is just a situation around winning a game or a set or a match. Ooh, when it comes down to being the match.
Or there's people that really are just doing it maliciously.
Yeah, and then you have the person who's just like.
I only think there's the malicious when it's like they feel like it's revenge. Like that's I don't really know people that like do it purposefully outside
Adults,
of the junior
I
world.
agree. College, 100%.
No, college is a whole nother level.
If we're
but I'm
talking
saying
adults.
like, yeah, I mean, juniors.
Let's try to generally keep it kind of steered towards adults.
But yeah, I think
that's,
adults don't. Especially the women, like if they feel like they were cheated, then there's like this, like, okay.
call them close, baby.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think you have certain adults who have this kind of how do I want to describe it? Like gruffly, like, I don't care what you think. I'm gonna make the call when I see the call. Guys and girls, and they just make. I've played doubles in certain situations, and I've had a partner who's called something. I'm like, ooh, dude, like really? And they look at me like it was out. I'm like, what ball were you watching? And it was like in, and it's like.
I've been there.
Yeah. And you're like, I'm pretty sure you're wrong.
And it's the worst when your opponents are like, how did you see it?
And
like,
yeah, so I'm going to leave it there. I think for the most part, I think in adult tennis, you don't see it, but you run into some players that just have this like ability to not care and to take points when they need it or want it. And they just kind of carefully pluck points. They don't do it consistently, but they pluck a point or two at the right times. You're like, what the heck? And then they're like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm totally fine.
So just for the sake of like the conversation and knowing like our audience primarily, so from beginner adult up to 4 or 5 adult, what percentage of wrong calls do you believe are purposeful bad calls?
I would say about, I'm going to go on the low end. I'm probably about 20%.
Okay.
20 to maybe 25% of calls are those.
They know it's a bad call, but they're making it anyway.
I call them the pluckers. They pluck those points when they need them.
All right, Megan?
I vote 10% because
adult.
Yeah, juniors is a whole nother ball game, and like college tennis is just like 95%.
They're all pluckers.
Yeah, but yeah, I think adult, I would say around 10%. Now that does not include the people who just can't see the ball and who don't.
Oh, you're not including like
no, like not purposefully. Like they really truly believe.
That's a lot of people in my experience. Like being around country, like the country club. Like,
yeah, they truly believe that their call was
absolutely.
Out, and they're not doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
So,
but
yeah,
you're not including.
I'm not including them.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
I included that.
So you think it's really low then?
Yeah, I don't think that there's a whole lot of people. Like, I think there's way more people that really and truly believe the ball was out.
Yeah.
And they just didn't see it right. I mean, I know we've all made calls like that regardless.
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't, like, you physically are like, oh, I just, it's going to go out. I'm willing it out. It's going out. It's going out. And it's like,
out.
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, it's out. And then but then you maybe look back at a replay or something and you're like, oh, I could have sworn that ball was out.
We've all made mistakes. There's no
Right.
question.
So not including like human error, then I think 10% is like, okay, malicious or revenge of some sort. Like they know the ball is in and they're calling it out.
I don't know. I think
That's
I
that's
agree
what
with that, but I put in the percentage that there's players, aka sometimes the pluckers, that have this belief that it's like, if it's close, it's out.
Well, those
And
people
they-
I'm putting in the 10%.
And then the people are like, I can't see. God. I mean, sometimes they can't see at these crucial moments. So I don't know.
We'll never know, right?
Yeah,
It's like
but
we'll never know what's really going on in
Yeah.
there.
I'm just saying like human error if you not include that.
Well, I think that's a huge chunk, personally.
Yeah,
I think
no, for
human
sure.
error is a big, for me, including human error, again, like being around like average, players for basically my whole career. Kevin and Megan spent over a decade in high performance junior, like national level junior competition. So that's a whole nother and I know you guys did adults too, but I basically I was on the other end of the spectrum. I only did adults, and daily I probably reversed, I don't know, six or 8 calls a day, probably, conservatively, where exactly what you're describing, they really truly thought it was out, and it really truly was not. Like I was standing right there, and over the years, it just became kind of fascinating to me how many of those calls were being made from somebody who honestly felt like they were doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. And I guess for me, that's the biggest thing I wanted to, communicate is, and I would go, 10% or below for me. For adult, like recreational tennis, it's probably less than 10% of calls are actually being made maliciously of the bad calls. And the rest of them are just, they're just wrong. It's more difficult to make a good line call than I think most people realize.
Oh, for sure.
Realize.
For sure.
It's much more. I mean, you look at line refs at like Grand Slams. They've gone through training, and a lot of them travel with the tour, and it's like what they do, full time is they make line calls, and you look at the Hawkeye data. And they're wrong a pretty significant percentage of the time. I'm not saying 75%, but these are people whose only job, and they've been trained, is to make that line call on one line, and they're positioned perfectly to call that one line, and they mess it up. And so for us, running around a 1,400 square foot rectangle and having to look back the other direction and make it an accurate call it's impossible to do accurately all the time. So that, for me, I just wanted to get that out there because there's so much. I think so much of it is the revenge calls and all that. So much of it is in response to honestly bad.
Yeah, that's what
just
I think
a mistake.
it is,
It's an honest mistake. And I think there needs to be more like grace in the system about line calls because, some people also need to second guess themselves more frequently. Maybe that's a good way of saying it. Like some people need to be more honest with themselves that they do make bad calls.
Well, it's just like when I posted on Facebook that picture
like
of
the dirty little secret.
Totally.
There's so for those of you who didn't see it, like I posted a picture that's a ball that is almost like it's there's a line. And we won't say whether it was on or off. It was near the line. And I asked, okay, is this ball in or out? And I probably got over 200 comments on it. And nobody can agree. No one could agree. Yeah, everything was
it's a picture.
Of course it is, of course it isn't, And
Totally.
so I think that...
that's when the ball's not moving and when the human is not moving.
Right. Well, and yeah, I mean, it is physically a picture that you could look at for 10 years and it's never going to move. Like, and you still can't agree upon whether the ball is in or out. And so, I don't know. I think a lot of it is human error. And I think most of the time people are trying to call lines correctly. But I think that there's I personally think that most of the bad line calls that are like truthfully the ball was in and I'm calling it out are because they thought the other person cheated them first.
Yep.
And they're like, I'm justified in, like, as long as I feel like as a person, you feel like you're justified in the cheat, then you like have some sense of like, okay, that's fine because I'm justified in it for this reason or that reason.
That's a moral Pandora's box for opening.
Why does the word moral come up every
I like to just include it. It's like my buzzword.
All right, so this next one we kind of touched on, so let's maybe move through it quickly, or you guys can just tell me if you think we should just pass through it. I want to get pretty quickly to how to deal with it, but the next kind of question was, and sub-question, how were you most commonly cheated, and what are kind of the biggest like themes or examples to watch out for? We kind of... I
think lines are hands down, like, line cheating is probably one of the biggest
Any
things.
patterns that you get that are kind of jumped out at you guys is like in this situation or like this line or this type of opponent or, XYZ, this type of shot?
Yeah, the biggest one I think is when people turn around and they're running back towards the ball and the ball is actually in front of them. So there's no way as your opponent can see the ball landing. Like say the ball goes over your head.
What's the situation? Right. So you're like
at the net or service line area and the ball goes over your head and you're running back to get the ball and the ball lands in front of you on the baseline.
Back by the baseline, yeah.
Right. And your opponent cannot tell whether the ball's in or out because you're in the middle.
That's a pretty
you're blocking
move,
I know what you're talking about.
Because you're blocking it.
Totally don't.
So that was like, I mean, you call it out and nobody could tell whether it was in or out. Yeah. I would say that was the biggest thing I saw. Like a lot of 4-0 guys that I taught, like that was their...
Did you ever see somebody like purposely position themselves before the bounce?
Oh, heck yeah.
So they knew they were in the way.
But we were also in a like fun, competitive environment. And it was like during like drills or during stuff like that. Yeah. I didn't really see it necessarily in
competition.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. No real patterns. I mean, sometimes if it's far away in a corner where no one can see it and it's a specific point, that's when it gets a little hairy. But other than that, nothing. It's just like the pluckers. When they need it, they take it.
I think serves are a big one. That's the last one I'll just kind of throw in there. It's generally, and it depends on the level. It tends to be like the biggest, shot, the fastest shot of the point. This is why in Division 1 they play lets, is because everybody used to call a let on every ace. Just be, oh, sorry, I touched the net, and they'd have to reserve it again. Are they changing that though?
They're talking about it, but it's only men's Division 1.
It's just so.
I feel like the serve is the one shot where there's a lot of missed calls because you can't see it.
Human error,
yeah, human error. I think I give more grace on the serve than the baseline because I think there's a lot more human error because you're trying to read the ball and return the ball, and you have so little time between the bounce and you have to react that a lot of things get missed.
Mm-hmm. That was probably the one shot when I used to teach that beginner. I taught a beginner tennis class to adults, and that was the one thing people always said was, how am I supposed to return the ball, watch the ball, hit it over the net, and call it where it lands at the same time? And I was
tough.
You gotta,
All right, let's move forwards. When you were competing, how did you most effective? What was like the approach or the strategy to dealing with people that you felt were maliciously making bad calls?
I had like my early warning detection system. You like that? Meaning that if I hit a ball that was close and they call it out, I think a lot of people, when the first call happens and they're like, oh, okay, I would be like, are you sure? And I kind of walk and put a little bit more emphasis on letting them know it's like I'm watching the lines.
Is that against the rules now? Are you sure? Isn't that
I don't
like
think
in the
I'm
code,
sure.
I think?
Some refs are a little harder on it, but you can at least ask and put a little bit more emphasis on it than just letting it go. And then if it gets where it's like they did another one, then I make a bigger deal out of it. And it's like, okay, I think if you let it go too long, what happens is they set this expectation of like, oh, well, they didn't really question that one. Maybe I'll take this one if you've played a person who's actually hooking you. So I definitely challenge, not necessarily in a bad way, the first one, and just like, kind of like, hey, really? Was that out? And then if it happens again, by the third one, we're having a conversation at the net. We're talking.
You're asking them to come up and talk to you?
I'm not asking, but I'm having the conversation at the net. Like, look, dude, your calls are awful.
And so you're just straight up. I'm
gonna call him on it.
You're gonna say your calls are awful.
Yeah, he does. That's what he does.
Or I'll say something like, "Are you blind?" or something, just a little pokey. Because for me, it tells me about the person. If they can continue making bad calls and I really call them out on it, they're that type of person that is not going to go away. Most people, if they're like, "Oh, dude, well, I'm sorry, blah blah blah," or they'll like, "Well, I thought it was out," but if the person just walks away from you and goes, "It's out, deal with it," I know what type of person I'm dealing with now. And then you either, if in a situation, adults, you can get a ref. Or
we need like a flow.
But you can't.
We need a flow chart.
But here's the other situation: you either get a ref or you play your balls inside the baseline more. For me, I actually sometimes enjoy playing a hooker.
Because it's about like I'll still beat you kind of attitude.
Oh, it fires me up like no. I used to play this game with my roommate where I pretend he'd hook me. And I'm like, dude, I can't believe it. And he's like, dude, the ball was way in. It's like, I can't believe you do that to me. And I would like fire myself up and then crush. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I know. What was the actual question again?
How do you deal with a hooker?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I usually give people actually the benefit. Most people will find this weird about me, but I actually give the benefit of the doubt in most circumstances. But I am really against the whole, are you sure? I am really adamant.
It's not in the rules, by the way.
No, it's not. You can say it.
I thought I heard or read someplace that it was like a new, like you literally weren't allowed to say, are you sure? Because it's like repeated so often in tennis matches.
Some refs will say that you have to ask them, but it's not actually a rule.
Okay. If the ref is there.
Yeah. But yeah, which doesn't happen a lot in adult tennis anyways.
No.
But I am a huge advocate for saying that ball was in, right? Instead.
Are you saying after they've
for sure,
made an out call?
Yes.
Little Jedi mind trick.
Because in most cases, if they felt like it was a wrong call, they'll change their call. But if they're not, then you kind of know who you're dealing with, the same thing. But I usually give people 1, 2. The third one is usually where I'm like, okay, I just look at them and say, that ball was in, right? And if they're like, no, it was clearly out, then I say, okay. And then you,
Clearly is a big word
right.
there.
Or way out.
Or way out.
Yeah.
Or they always do the same, like, they spread their arms way far away from each other. And they're like, it was 10 feet out. Yeah, it wasn't even close. Yeah. So, but I feel like, I mean, again, it's the same thing I used to tell like the juniors, because it happens so often too and I used to tell the adults the same thing, is like, give people the benefit of the doubt and give them 1 or 2, because you've probably made 1 or 2. And so I always think it evens out. But if they're on the third one is really where I usually Yeah. And again, like I don't like the "Are you sure?" because it gives them the opportunity to be like, "Yes, I am sure. You're right. I am sure." But if you're like, "That ball was in," right? It gives them a little bit more of a.
I like that.
Or sometimes I give them a little stare down, a little long lingering pause.
He doesn't give a little stare down. Just so we're clear, he literally stares at you for
nothing crazy, just
5
lingering,
minutes without moving.
Little question mark, little puzzlement on my face, like.
I think you talked about like walking towards the call is a good, like positive, like body language as well. Yeah. Just to make, it's like communicates, like I'm not going to just turn around and be like, oh, this is, make whatever call you want. I'm glad you guys went first because I was never good at dealing with this, honestly. My alternative to the "Are you sure?" has always been by how much. Like I want them to like tell me what are we talking about, an inch, a foot, like 10 feet, like how far out was it really? Because I'm only going to ask that question when I had a really nice look at it and I feel really strongly about it, and kind of like you, like I want to know like what am I dealing with here, like really, like are they going to say 2 feet when it was clearly not 2 feet?
Oh.
Or are they going to be like,
people that say 10 feet, like it's clearly 10 feet.
I feel like if they have good intentions and they really are doing their best, then they're going to give like an honest answer. They're going to be like, I don't know, like 3 or 4 inches, something like that. But if they're just like way out or 2 feet, if they give a ridiculous answer, then you know, okay, this is the type of like match that it's going to be. But from there, honestly, I never dealt with it very well. And I wish that I had the perspective of having watched adult players for, tens of thousands of hours first before I went through my competitive career, because I didn't have yet the perspective of knowing how many like genuinely honest like bad calls are actually made on a tennis court. And so I wish it's so easy to assume like you're in this like head-to-head, face-to-face like battle where you're like trying to figure out how to beat each other. And it's so easy to just jump to the conclusion that they're hooking you. Especially
when you're out there by yourself and you have no one else to like, if you're playing singles, like there's no one else to like calm you down or be like, dude, you're
it's okay, it was out or
whatever. Right, yeah.
But I also
think you just keep telling yourself like, well, they must be cheating me. And then you just
and then they think that about you and it
just
escalates.
Cycles.
Yeah, I think another thing about, at least for me, when I say, "Are you sure?" It's really for me about seeing how they're going to react. If they're like totally like, and to make it really clear, I'm only going to ask that if it's like a really blatant thing.
If you're really confident.
Yeah, like I'm like, whoa. If it's close, I'm probably not even going to shake a hat at it. But if it's like a blatant thing, I want to know how they're going to react to me asking about it. Is it going to be like, oh shoot, yeah, dude, the ball's out.
Do they have any goodwill?
Yeah, and it's like if they react like kind of shocked, like kind of taken aback, like, oh yeah, the ball was out. I'm like, oh, okay.
Then at least they're trying their best.
But if they react like it's not even close to it, and they just turn, and you can tell in the body language the kind of intention of the person, and it tells you so much about how your match is going to be, and then that's kind of what fuels the fire. And so, I mean, I think it's all about
very patiently. Yeah.
It's about how after that you have to figure out how you're going to deal with it emotionally.
I don't think that's necessarily true, because I think that there's the people, like if people constantly are questioning me and I know that I'm making the right calls, then I will get a little not very nice.
Yeah, it depends on the specifics.
I will be like, yes,
if
it
it's the
was
first
out.
question and there's that kind of response, and I tend to agree with Kevin. But there are people that are constantly asking, like even on a.
But yeah, I'm not that. No, I'm not the person that's like every part. Are you sure? Are you sure? I'm sure. I'm like, yeah. I'll probably like if there's a couple close ones, I'll just kind of maybe pause and like, or my favorite is like
ask a ton.
No, I don't ask. Lie. Calm down.
Oh snap.
I'll like pump my fist and go, come on, because you do the early come on because you think you hit a winner, and they have to overrule your positive come on. And if they do that, I'm like, whoa. I'm like, really? Okay, and then I'll walk away, and then maybe there's a long hold up, there's a long look, and then if I've noticed that there's a pattern, then I'm breaking out the "Are you sure?" But it's not. I'm not the person on the court, which I do hate myself. I've seen in juniors, adults, where it's like, boom, "Are you sure?" Okay, and they walk back, and the next point it's like, "Are you sure? Really? Are you sure? Are you sure?" And then they walk back 2 more points. It's like, "Oh, come on, really? Are you sure about that?" No, that's not. I give you one "Are you sure?" after I've given you kind of like some leeway around 3 calls, and then we're going into like Red October, like we got a battle mode.
Just to be clear, the early come on
is that like you do that to me once.
Yeah. I'm okay with somebody being snarky after an early.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what happens.
That just escalates the emotional like response.
And so there's no like I could be not cheating you. I could be totally being, you know, like everything could be fine. And if you're gonna be on that side, like extra come-ons or extra, then I'm going to be, you ask me, are you sure? I'm going to give you a response that's snarky and just like, yes, I'm 100% sure.
I agree with Megan with one caveat. Like a certain amount of that I think is like, it depends on the environment. How intense of a competitive battle, you know, is this really? I think if it's like a team environment, everybody's watching, like you're playing for club championships, whatever, you have to expect some of that. And I think that's part of like, that's what you signed up for, is like that kind of battle.
Okay, yeah.
But there's a certain like execution and quantity and quality of it that
I totally understand where the line is.
It crosses a line.
And here's the thing. When you everybody's done it where you hit a ball, you know the son of a gun's in. And I'm not talking about close. It's in. And someone just goes, snatch, plucked you. And you're like, what?
But you think it's in doesn't mean that they think it's in, and I think that's
they're still human.
And that's fine.
Right.
How many times have you hit a shot or you've hit a shot, and the natural reaction, you can't even. It's not even like you're forcing it. You go, come on, because you're like, oh, I hit the shot, and someone calls it out, and you're
that's
like,
what I'm saying.
Like,
the environment draws.
But I'm not
up.
talking about like hitting the shot and forcing the in call. Yes, sometimes I've done that, but I'm not talking about in this particular situation. I'm just talking about at the start. This is Death Con, was it like 5 or which one's the highest?
I don't remember which way it goes.
Anyway, if one's the highest, we're at Death Con 5
We need to make
an
infographic for like all the different
We're at Death Con 4 or 5 right now. We haven't like graduated to 1. So if we're at like 1 or 2, oh, it's going to get like, come on, crazy.
He's just not the type of, like, this is why we don't play together, because I would want to kill. Like, I don't deal well with players that are like that.
Super hype.
Yeah, because if somebody says, are you sure? Every single time I'm going 100% sure.
Like if I'm really playing though, I'm not super hype. I'm very focused until you like poke the bear. If you poke the bear and it's like come on, dude, like we're having a good match, or come on, girl, we're having a good match.
Come on, girl.
We're having a good match, and then you're like,
I would hook you for that comment.
Yeah. We're having a good match, and then it goes crazy. I'm like, okay, look, you know, I'm trying to have just a good, clean match, and you're like taking the fun out of it. Then I'm going to take measures into my own hand and get myself to a level where I can deal with it emotionally. Because I think a lot of people, what happens is, and I don't know if this is the next question, how people deal with it.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the next question was how do you advise your students, basically?
So you want me to start there?
I'll just wrap up my answer real quick, just by saying I've always struggled dealing with this, honestly. Like just emotionally, it's hard. It's hard for me to confront, you know, somebody. And I only really truly did it once, where I said to somebody's face, you are a cheater. And I know I've been hooked more than that, but I tend to give people a lot of the benefit of the doubt. And I think part of that subconsciously was just knowing that if I went there, my performance was probably going to nosedive, and that's what happened in that match. He hooked me on set point, and it ended up going 3, and I lost the match. Because third set, I was like, I just don't even want to be here right now.
I was just heard that. It just got me going.
So I've always avoided like the direct confrontation. So yeah, let's talk about how have you advised your students? Could be junior, could be adult, whatever. What is your like official guidance to somebody that you're coaching on how to deal with somebody who's making bad calls?
I think first of all, focus on the things you can control, because you can't control if they're cheating you. Second of all, don't make the focus of your either energy outbursts them. So like, I've never actually called someone a cheater. I've said, oh, you hooked me on a point. That line call was pretty close, but I've never right out said, you are a cheater. Generally, if I've gone through my Death Con 5 or 4 and we got to the point where like, okay, this person's playing dirty, I shut up, I get myself going, and I start playing within the lines more. And if I win a point, any type of point where I win, that's like a hard fought point, I'm going, come on, I'm getting pumped up, and I'm using me winning points and telling them through my come-ons, my positivity is like, no matter what you do, it's not going to stop me. Even if I lose a match.
Talking about students, that might not be your students.
Sorry.
Like
so
emotional.
Students' emotional level is honestly the same thing. I just tell them not to focus on how they're cheating you, but focus on what you can do, which is you can hit balls inside the line more. You can take every point you win and be super positive about it. And even if they hook you, just come back and figure out a way to win. Come in the net, hit balls in the middle of the court where, like, if they have to hook you, they have to hook you with balls that land on the service line or whatnot and figure out a way to win. And I think with that attitude, because the other side of it is this, you get caught up in this person's cheating me, I can't do anything. And then you totally give all your power to the cheater. You totally just like, that's exactly what they want. They're like, okay, maybe, I mean, we used to have students who are like, okay, he knows he's going to cheat you to see if you're going to just tank and give up and get like freak out. Yeah. That's what they're going to do. And if you give into that, they're going to cheat you more because they're just like, oh, I just got to pull 1 point and he's going to fall apart. And so the worst thing is to fall apart, to get so focused on the person cheating you. And I think you have to focus on staying super ultra positive because it is hard because you feel like you're being robbed, you're being plucked. And when you're being robbed, you feel helpless. And so I think the first thing is you have to make sure that you don't feel that way so you can think and have the ability to use whatever you brought to the court to win. Because if you're just going to be negative, you have no access to like thinking. Like, I mean, it's hard to think when all you're thinking about is like, oh, I can't do anything. They're
there's no more problem solving.
Yeah.
It all just goes away.
You have to be in the right frame of mind. So I think the first part is, and for me, that is probably Megan saying it like, dude, he's a pain in the butt to play. Because that's the first place I go. It's like, I'm going to control the situation on my end and making sure they know that he's not going anywhere. He's actually getting tougher. And so for me, that sets up the situation where if they cheat me and I start playing better, that sends a signal to them like, maybe I shouldn't cheat anybody. Or maybe I shouldn't cheat them.
Or cheat more.
Yeah, well, no.
Just kidding.
Yeah, if you try that, but...
Must not be cheating enough.
Yeah, I know. But I've had people do that where they started cheating and I play better and they were like, nah, he got fired up, he started hitting more winners, he started getting more aggressive, and I'm losing more points. That was the wrong idea. And that's the message I want to send, that if you're going to do that, I'm going to increase my level of play and that it's going to be harder for you to win more points. Megan?
I feel like if you're at nationals or somewhere where there is a ref present, then I always say give them 2, and then on the third one, go get a ref. If you're in a situation where there's not, then I still say give them 2. And then on the third one, you say that ball was in, right? And I'm very specific with all my students that you don't ask, are you sure? That you say that ball was in, right? And then if it continues, you have to make sure that your mindset is, I'm going to beat you even though you're cheating me. And that has to be what you're thinking instead of, focusing on, oh, they're winning points because they're cheating. But rather, you can cheat me all you want and I'm still going to win.
Yeah, I totally agree. If you have access to a ref, that's a great situation. But I think probably 90% of players that are playing, don't have access to refs unless you're at some high level tournament where refs are
sectionals, nationals,
and even with the problem with it is even in adults, you have these roving refs, which is awesome that they come over, but they'll watch 1 or 2 games. Suddenly the person's fine. And the moment they leave, they show up again. So again, for me, it's like that one thing is like, keep the ball in your court in the sense of, it's great to have a ref, and if the ref is there, you can depend on the ref, but the moment the ref leaves, you're back to being on your own.
FYI, you can always ask the ref to stay, and if you ask them to stay, they have to stay. It's in the rules.
Really?
Yep.
I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. I actually heard refs say they don't have to stay.
Mm-mm. If you specifically ask them to come back over and over and you say, like, I need you to stay here, it's in the rules that they're supposed to stay.
Really?
Is what I was told. Maybe that's wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. We'd have to look that one up. I've been told that refs are like, they don't have to stay.
I'm sure someone listening to this is going to look it up for me.
They'll let us know.
Yep, and you'll let me know whether I'm right or wrong.
I don't really have anything, additional to add. I think Kevin Megan covered it really well. I think the thing you led with, Kevin, the focus on what you can control, it's so much easier said than done, but so much of competition comes down to that. It might be a person whose style you hate. It might be a pusher. It might be a surface that you hate. You have to play on clay when you always play on hard court. It might be the sun. It might be outside instead of inside. It might be somebody making bad line calls. Those are things that are outside of our control. If the ball landed on their side of the court and there's no refs available, that's the way it is. And so the only thing you can really do practically is what Kevin and Megan are talking about. Find a ref, play closer inside the lines. It doesn't mean it's fair. It doesn't mean it's fun, unless you're Kevin maybe. But it's something that you have, if you want to be a competitor, you have to learn how to do. Like, there's just no way around it.
I think also knowing a little bit about your personality. Like, you'll have some sense of like how you deal with pressure situations.
Yeah.
And then if you know that, try to build in some kind of routines for you to know. If you know you're the type of person that under pressure, you have a tendency to freak out and go for more, then you might need to calm yourself down and say, I need to make 10 balls now.
That's definitely me.
If you're the person under pressure that you tend to get super excited, you may need to, whatever it is, you need to kind of plot out some plan so you're not surprised that when something like, because something's going to go wrong. I don't care. It's like at some point in your tennis career, you're either going to get a bad line call. There's going to be, like Ian just said, but go ahead and like take a second or two and say, like, what kind of player am I? What kind of personality do I have? How do I deal with these situations? And come up with a small game plan, because the last thing you want to do is be on the court trying to figure that out. And that's tough to do.
It's pressure, but it's also, I think, the social conflict, like the face-to-face, like confronting somebody and being like, listen, I think you're cheating me, is something that most people, I think, are probably terrified of. You, maybe not so much, but like I'm on the opposite end of that spectrum. And I think most people, in particular in a club environment where they don't want to be the one that's like shaking the hornet's nest socially, it can be a very intimidating thing to actually stand up for yourself, in that situation. If it comes to the point where you're really confident that it's actually like malicious calls. And so, but I'm just saying, in the same way that you have to know how you respond to pressure, because I love pressure, but I hate, the personal, the confrontation. You have to know yourself, I think, in the confrontation side of the personality spectrum too. And just know like how can you grapple with that situation without totally tanking yourself emotionally and just like not being able to compete.
Yeah, it's a balance of how important is it for you to say something and take your focus off what you're doing and off the strategies and off what's working and what's not working and the plays and the tactics to, okay, do I confront their cheating? Like, and it needs to be, in my mind, pretty blatant to have that focus shift there. Because that's a big shift in your own mental mindset as well as their mental mindset too. Like that you're either giving them fuel to the fire or not. So.
Yeah, and I also think though there's different levels of confrontation. Like,
we need an infographic.
Yeah, it really is. Like you're saying, I was actually really surprised. I was going to say it earlier that you called somebody a cheater, because I think that's.
I've only ever done that one time.
Yeah, that's for me. I'm like,
I've
wow,
never done that either.
I've never done that.
100,000% that I got cheated out of a set.
Yeah, it's just weird, because for me, when I hear the word cheater, it's like that person is a cheater compared to cheating. It's like you cheated me a point or two. So I would say there's different level of confrontation, and I'm probably coming a little bit more from a singles, like out and like playing by myself. But if I was in a club situation, a couple other things come to mind is that you don't necessarily have to say, what's the saying I used? Was that in?
Are you sure?
Are you sure? Because Megan doesn't like that. So what you could do is just like pause. Just have a cold pause and wait for them and say, oh, I didn't hear the call. And that's something you can do in a club situation.
That's a great way to make it clear that you're not a fan of what
you're not a fan of what happened. Another thing you can do if you're playing in a social situation is always get a friend, have them go sit on the fence on their baseline.
That is so
They don't
dirty.
have to say anything, but it brings some awareness to the other opponent.
That's dirty.
Hey, but here's the thing: you're in a social situation.
That's worse than confrontation.
No.
But it's like for me.
Hear it out. Your friend doesn't say anything; they just sit on the line. It brings awareness to the like someone. Yeah, it depends on how aggressive they want to sit on the line.
Standing on the line.
But totally, I've had where it's junior situation, but a coach was coaching a girl. The opponent he was coaching his girl that was playing my player. And so I was like, seriously, dude, you're on the fence literally talking to the player. So I went up right.
Which is against the rules.
So I went up right next to him and said, hey, how's it going? And I sat there talking to him the entire match. And he was kind of like, oh.
But you enjoy that.
I do, but it's like
that's
sometimes.
That's the difference.
Honestly,
there's not a lot of people that do that.
Honestly, I don't enjoy it. But when it comes to.
I think he does.
Listen. Let me get it out. I don't enjoy it. Until it comes to, I'm probably very protective of my players. If I believe in you, then I'm willing to put myself in uncomfortable situations to give you a fair shot.
You believe in yourself too, though.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. I've had, but
that's a nice way of saying it, Ian.
I've had players where I was like, this one guy was like, God, I don't want to sit over here. I don't want to make a big deal out of this. But I was like, seriously, this is just unfair. And my player he's literally like the other player is like just being completely coached. And I'm like, I have to do something just to make sure it's a fair playing ground so they can do their thing on the court. And so there's just different degrees. So make sure when you're in a social situation, it doesn't have to be like, you're a cheater, come on. And if you don't feel comfortable with it, it could be a simple pause and going, hey, I'm sorry. And you can make it very point blank. Like, hey, I'm sorry. I didn't hear the call there. What was it? And they're like, oh, okay. And that just lets them know in a very subtle way that like, hey,
you're paying attention.
Hey, I'm paying attention. You can have your crowd sit on or your friends sit on the line. They don't have to say anything. They don't have to cheer. They don't have to boo.
They don't have to be holding a crowbar.
They don't have to hold a crowbar or like a sniper gun. Rifle, sorry. But it just adds levels of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just
pressure.
Confrontation. That is a strong word.
Yeah, it's not really the word I'm looking for, but
you're keeping it in check.
Yeah, keeping it in check. Checks and balances where you don't have to do stuff like that. And honestly, it's going to be hard for someone to make a really bad call if like half your team is on that side. I mean, it's like they have to be that type of person. And if they're that type of person again, it's like you're going to have to deal with it. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. Don't feel.
But you also hate being that person who accidentally maybe didn't make the right line call and you truly believe that you made the line call and the whole team comes over and is like sitting on your line and cheering against you. And it happens all the time at like USTA and stuff like that.
When
and
it was an honest mistake.
Come on. Yeah, it was human error. It wasn't on purpose. And now your whole team is over there like cheering against, your opponent. So I feel like it's a fine line between going into like just being a jerk mode.
It comes back to having some grace about it and understanding that there are a lot of.
I think there should be more grace than there should be of dealing with.
I totally agree.
I think in a perfect world,
totally
we would all love to have more grace and more gratitude and feel free that everybody is not. But sometimes, if that's not happening, then we have to do something. And I'm not against the grace. I'm not against giving people.
Everybody thinks I'm that person, and I'm actually not. It's Kevin. See.
She keeps saying this, but okay. But anyway,
all right. I want to move on to the final question.
Okay.
Unless you have like something.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Graceful to say.
Yeah, we're coming up on an hour again, like really fast. All right. So final question here. The nuclear option. Starting with Kevin. Kevin, is it ever okay to revenge? And just to define this means that your opponent hits a shot that's clearly in and you call it out just to kind of send a message, just to kind of make a statement.
Dun, dun, dun. What do you think, guys? And the answer is never. I have never revenge hooked. I don't believe in it.
Have you, maybe not you personally, but have you ever witnessed a scenario where it was necessary or it was warranted?
It's never necessary. I'm sorry. I don't believe in it. I don't believe in it. I don't believe hooking someone back when I know you guys are both smiling.
Send your entire team over there.
No. Yes.
That's where he draws the line.
But no, I honestly don't believe in it. I think because I think if I start hooking, now I just lowered myself to what they're doing. And then I give myself no grace for anything to happen because I'm just a part of what they're doing. I'm a part of the problem. So I never believe in it. I mean, I just don't. I'm sorry.
I've never told
100%, just to be clear, across the board, never.
Across the board,
never,
no.
okay,
I don't care how bad you hook me. I'm not going to revenge hook you. I'm going to figure out a way to beat you.
And your official
you wouldn't
advice
tell
for
your
students
yeah.
as
No,
well?
I would never tell them. Honestly, if my student did that, I reprimand them. I tell them, I don't care how bad you're getting hooked, how bad they are, you do not hook back. Yeah. I'm sorry. I just don't believe in it.
Mm-hmm. Just get the entire team around there.
It's crowbars.
Right. Yeah.
Kevin said no crowbar for the record.
Yeah. I know. I've never told anyone to revenge hook either. Like I would never advise. What?
Nothing. I just itching on my nose. Sorry.
Oh my gosh. I would never advise a student to revenge hook. No. Now I might revenge hook.
Okay.
But I would never advise.
That itch on my nose.
Have you ever purposely?
No, I actually haven't. But there's some part
You
of
sound
me
a little
that
disappointed.
really,
Yeah,
I know.
So-
There's some part of me that actually would totally love to revenge hook, but I never have really gotten up the nerve to. My talk is a whole lot bigger than my bite, so I've never actually gotten up the nerve to actually revenge hook. But I would never advise anyone to do it. For sure. But I've seen it done many, many times.
Wishing that she had.
And when you've seen it done, have you ever seen the outcome be? Obviously, it's never a positive situation, but have you ever seen the outcome be like it was helpful or it was a good outcome based on sending the message?
Yeah, I actually have. I mean, I've had people that, like the other person, it's in juniors that I've seen it. I've never seen anyone truly revenge hook and it worked to their advantage in adults. Usually it like is their demise. Like you start revenge hooking and your brain just can't handle the strategy and the stress and the da-da and it just goes downhill. But I have seen juniors in the junior world that there's a specific few girls that would really, really, really cheat really bad. And you would go on and you would just hook them from the very beginning and then things would be a lot better. But it
actually was better?
Yeah.
Like the person who was known for
because
cheating?
they would come out and be like, there was one girl that was really bad and we had a girl that played her and just from the very first game went out and she was like, I'm going to hook you every time you hook me.
Wait,
and
she literally
just told
said
her,
that? Mm-hmm. She actually said that?
Yep.
Wow.
She told her and she hooked her and then she hooked her back and then there was no more cheating the rest of the match. So I have seen it work like that, but I only think that I think
extreme.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've never seen it work
And
to
she had a
anyone's
reputation
advantage. She did.
preceding
she did.
her.
Both of them had reputations. So yeah, I mean, I've never seen it work to anyone's advantage in adult tennis. I always think that when the focus goes there, it always backfires.
I think the social pressure of that
I think the situation matters a lot. I've never done it. I couldn't possibly like sleep at night if I condoned it or like recommended it. Like I'll never be like, yeah, sure. This is like when you, here's like the 3 steps you need to, we should do a video. How to revenge hook. I've only seen it once and it was in college and it worked. Like it got the message across and the rest of the match was level after that. And the person who did the revenge hooking ended up winning the match. That's the only time I've seen it deployed, and it was aggressive, and it sent the message. I think it's like a very, very tiny minority of situations. It has to be extremely aggressive to get to that point. I won't say that it's never
DEFCON 1.
I won't say that it's never warranted or that it can't ever be effective. But on the other hand, I can't possibly like condone it or recommend. And I would never personally, mostly because of my personality, probably. There's probably a part of me that wishes I could do it.
Hey, yeah. We just need to go out. Let's
because I have
revenge hook each other, Ian.
Yeah.
Next time
There you
we're out
go.
there,
All
we'll
right.
just
Both of you guys
we
will
got
fall apart.
Totally. I know it wouldn't be good for my personal performance. Like it's just not the action that would help me play my best ever. So I probably won't ever do it. But there have been situations where I knew that it was at the point where you use the analogy or the phrase before, like I'm literally being robbed right now. Like I'm helpless and there's nothing I can do about this. And so there have been points in my career where I kind of wish I could have gone there, but it's just not in my nature. It's not in my personality.
No. And I think that's why on the other end, I'm probably a little bit more aggressive because I just don't believe in the revenge hook. So on the other side,
super fascinating that he's like absolutely not.
No, he's true. He tells everybody
I just hardcore don't believe in hooking people. Like
I respect that. Yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah.
Like I told that girl that went out there and said that, I told her that probably wasn't the best option.
So you didn't reprimand her?
No, but I didn't reprimand her. I was like, that was smart. It actually worked. Good job. But that's the way it happened.
Morals.
It worked. Yeah.
Just a second ago, she was commenting about me, but
it's funny.
Deep down.
All right. That's great conversation. Any final thoughts, Kevin or Megan?
Don't be a
cheaters.
Plucker.
Give some grace.
Yeah. Honestly, I think the whole thing is
finish up on that.
Yeah. I think that's the key word. Give some grace. Realize that it's tough making line calls. Give people room to make mistakes and not freak out. And hopefully they'll give you the same amount of room and space that you guys can have a great match. Because when you can both just go out there and trust that you're trying to make the best calls, you have a great match and you enjoy the game and you don't spoil the kind of the feeling of going out and playing just tennis without having to worry about, am I being robbed or plucked?
We all make bad calls.
Oh, yeah.
Whether we wanted to or not, we've all made bad calls. It's just kind of part of the human element of sport, tennis and all other sports. Like you look at the NFL, jeez, and there's debates for years about individual calls where they have slow motion replay and they're trying to do the best they can. And it's just impossible to be 100%. So with that, thanks for listening today. Please be sure to, you have until the end of, I never know how many days are in any month. The end of September, is it 31st? 30th. You have till the 30th of September to leave a rating, leave a review on iTunes or the podcast app on your iPhone. Send us a screenshot. We'll hook you up with the free program of your choice. Thank you so much to everybody that's done that already. The support's been amazing. We all appreciate it so much.
Awesome.
And we're looking forward to our next conversation. Take care.
Shankcast.